Good morning. You're listening to Retake Our Democracy, a 30-minute weekly show that airs at 8:30 a.m. each Saturday morning on KSFR 101.1 FM, your Santa Fe public radio station. I'm Paul Gibson, the host of Retake Our Democracy. And today I'm speaking with Mariel Nanasi, Director of New Energy Economy. And while I've had her on the show many times, never after she won the biggest regulatory case of her career. Standing alone against a mountain of money and onslaught of ads and support for the merger from some surprising folks, including many high-level Democrats, she faced justice prevailed and she got the verdict she wanted, and the merger is dead, the PNM Avangrid Iberdrola merger. Goodbye. And we'll hear about how that played out and what the decision invites as relates to future and New Mexico energy policy in just a second. But I want to just tell you a few other things first. Last week, I spoke with Harry McCormack, who is deeply involved in the hydrogen development business in Oregon. I figured if our governor is going to make her hydrogen hub the centerpiece of her legislative agenda, I had to reach out and talk with folks who are experienced with hydrogen development. The week prior, I interviewed 3 board members for the Santa Fe Basin Water Association, who had raised concerns about Santa Fe's rampant housing development despite very limited water resources. Before we get started, though, I have a few short announcements. If you're driving around and miss any of this show, you can watch the full YouTube recording of this and any prior interview by going to retakeourdemocracy.org, clicking on the Actions and Events page in the menu bar, and scroll down to the link to Retake Conversations, where all our shows reside. And I also want to acknowledge that we are conducting this interview on stolen Tewa land, and we want to thank our Tewa neighbors for being such good stewards of the land. Finally, I want to remind you that the 2022 legislative session is a bit over a month away, and Retake will be operating our legislative alert system again this year. We will talk I would appreciate if you want to get the alerts, you should click on our homepage, and on the right side, there's a button saying Get Alerts. If you do that, then when one of our bills is up before a committee or on the floor, you will get an email with talking points, a summary of the bill, and contact information for your legislator. And that's a very good way to keep informed and raise your voice effectively. Okay, no more announcements. I want to get to Mariel. Hello, Mariel.
Hi, thanks so much for having me, Paul.
Oh, my pleasure. I always like to let our guests introduce themselves. So how about if you tell us how you wound up becoming a utility attorney?
Well, it was around climate change. I'll keep this brief, but basically I thought, how can I look at my kids in their eyes and say that I didn't use my talents to do everything I could to address climate? And I wound up volunteering for New Energy Economy, and the then executive director ultimately asked me if I would take his position. And it's been a pleasure, a struggle, yeah, just a joy to do this work.
Okay, and you do it well. I've read that this was the biggest regulatory decision in the last 25 years. What was the case about, and why was it so important?
Well, essentially a $36 billion corporation called Avangrid, and then its parent, Iberdrola in Spain, which is another 100 and something billion dollar corporation. Wanted, what?
I think 180.
180, wanted to take over PNM. And at first blush, it was kind of exciting because they fancy themselves as a renewable energy company, except they really aren't. But they wanted to come here and, in their own words, use PNM, our monopoly, as our electric monopoly, as quote unquote a beachhead. That is literally the words that the CEO from Avangrid said. And I actually looked up what a beachhead is, to get the accurate definition, which I included in our brief. And what it means is it's a place where the enemy lands, or the aggressor lands to attack the enemy. And that's the word that he used. So he wanted to use P&M and the monopoly to take over the electric monopoly, to consolidate renewable production for the financial growth of both Avangrid and Iberdrola. In other words, they didn't choose P&M so they could make P&M a better utility to provide better service to P&M ratepayers. They wanted to use P&M as a Southwestern platform in the form of a government protected monopoly from which to make more acquisitions and sell renewable energy for their private profit. And it's sort of like them not only extracting our resources, but our wealth. And that was their plan.
Okay, what did the PRC decide, and what do you think was the single most important factor in the commissioner's decision?
Well,
Besides
there were
my
a number.
testimony.
Yeah, there was a number of reasons why they rejected this, and I think that the situation was that Avangrid and Iberdrola could not overcome their own track record of outages and unreliability, where they currently own other utilities in the Northeast, and their diminished service quality there. More than $63 million in penalties and violations just in the last 5 years. Failure to abide by the rules and law of this commission and this state. And then back to their real purpose here, which is essentially consolidation of the entire renewable energy market. I think one of the things that really was bothersome to the commissioners is that they want fair competition here and have a robust renewable energy market, not to have the kind of consolidation that Avangrid and Iberdrola were seeking, and said so. They said so. That's what they wanted to do. So one of the criteria is that they have to prove that there is no risk from subsidization of non-utility activities. And they couldn't prove that because they said, and that's what they've done in other venues, is that they create these quote baby affiliates. So they come in, they have their utility business, and then they create these baby businesses. And then those baby affiliate businesses ultimately crowd out the competition. And, though there was some attempt to create barriers to that, the commissioners, I think, rightfully really believed that they didn't have the power or the enforcement ability to police that activity. And they thought that that would be contrary to having a robust renewable energy market. There was lots of other issues, including the reduction of local control, because there's in these other Northeastern utilities, multiple audits and findings by courts and regulatory bodies found that Iberdrola and Avangrid's influence into the day-to-day operations of the utilities there was significant, and that it was something
detrimental.
And detrimental, and sometimes extremely detrimental. And so, but then I think the other thing that sort of, Commissioner Maestas called it a dark cloud, was the pending criminal investigation against the highest ranking people at Iberdrola. And their response is, we're an ethical company. And that's what they just say. And they repeat it like a mantra, but the facts show otherwise.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So you got a 5-0 vote. Did that surprise you?
No, I predicted it.
You were way too
I,
cocky for my take. I was nervous.
it's not to say that I wasn't sweating. I was sweating, but I predicted it. I predicted that um, the commission would prioritize exactly what they should, which was prioritizing reliability, fair competition in the renewable energy market, ethical and professional behavior. I think that they were really taken aback by the arrogance of this company and how they disrespected the hearing examiner and the commission rules. And that and then two other things I should just say. The whole like attractiveness of them was renewable energy prowess and money, right? That they had money. And so, but what came to the evidence came to demonstrate was that number one, they had no real experience with solar. And in fact, they are being investigated at this moment in the Maine Public Utility Commission for undermining community solar and rooftop solar. But then in the hearing, the CEO of Avangrid said, frankly, we're learning on the fly. Well, that completely undermined, the reason to have them here, right? What's the reason? The reason is that we want to transition from PNM's reliance on fossil fuels to a renewable energy economy. And yet they said, we really don't have the experience. And if you look at their portfolio, it's mostly gas, mostly nuclear, and now there's more and more wind coming on. But they have less than 2% solar. And then the other thing is the financial benefits. Yes, they have more money than PNM, but what came out again with the evidence demonstrated was that number one, there's no PNM, there's no evidence that PNM in its history can't borrow money. So that's one thing. And then the other thing that was sort of remarkable was that right before the hearing began, Avangrid was downgraded by Fitch and Moody's. And that meant that their credit rating was the exact same as PNM. And so, yes, while Avangrid has more money itself, PNM and Avangrid had equal access to borrowing money.
Okay. So at the end of the hearing, Commissioner Fishman noted that many commenters opposing the merger preferred a local option and possibly the development of public power. That must have been music to your ear. Can you tell us what public power is and let us know if anything is going on in relation to public power?
Yeah, thank you. I'm really happy that you brought that up, because that's the thing that I just want to say is really distressing about the news reporting. Instead of them like saying, okay, so what's next? And like, let's tease out these ideas. You're doing that work, which I am so grateful for your dedication to this community. So thank you. I want to answer that question by giving you a real life example. And that real life example is that in 1995, City of Santa Fe bought out the water utility that was then owned by PNM. And in 1995, we were using 14,000 acre feet of water per year. Now it's 2021, and we are using a little less than 8,000 acre feet per year. So we are using less water. We have more water available to us. For the very first time, our aquifers have begun to recharge. And PNM, and of course, during that 16-year time frame that the city of Santa Fe has owned it, we've grown in population. And some people say that if PNM were still owning the water utility, we would literally be out of water. And so what happens when there's a publicly owned utility is that there can be an emphasis on other things besides profit. And those are things like resilience. Those are things like safety. Those are things like water quality. Those are things like having a differing scale for people who use more and people who use less. All sorts of interesting kinds of ways to innovate, including having things like incentives for low flow toilets and things like that. That's what we could do if we owned our own energy utility. And that's what I believe public power ultimately is about. It's about not-for-profit goals of energy. So for instance, Kit Carson, terrible name, but that co-op is going to be 100% renewable energy during the daytime by next year. Piccaries Pueblo, it's the smallest pueblo in New Mexico, but they are 100% renewable by next year. That's consistent with science. And what else are they doing? They are lowering rates. What did I just say? Lowering electric rates. Money back into the pockets of the people. So less cost, getting to 100% renewable plus storage very quickly. And then the money generated from the profit of selling electricity gets repurposed back into other needs of the community. What would they be in Santa Fe? We could just imagine addressing homelessness, addressing health, addressing education. All these things are things that we could do. And we could deal with the electrification of other parts of our society as well. So there's all sorts of opportunity when we take the profit motive out of the equation and we prioritize the people's needs and the people's values.
Sounds very good. I'm glad we're working on that with you. I need to take a quick break here and mention that you're listening to KSFR 101.1 FM, your public radio station. And they offer, in a world full of misinformation, you can always count on KSFR to give you straight information, whether it's through their radio programming or through their news department or through their Democracy Now! So, but they don't run for free. They need money. And so they have an engineer, sound engineer, and they have a studio, and all of those things cost money. So if you've got a little extra change, how about if you go to ksfr.org and click on their donate button and just view it as your ticket for admission to great programming. Thank you for that. Mariel, I understand that you're working with, I mean, I know you're working with, because I'm working with you too, with some folks from Taos and from the land office, and we're working on trying to develop a memorial to get to the Roundhouse this session to study and design what a public power system would look like. Can you talk about that for a second?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that Speaker Egoff had suggested to me was that if we could show the potential benefits of public power, that and that includes the enormous revenue benefits that could, I mean, I think that could be an economic engine for this state that we could enjoy, then we could have a revenue stream that would be in perpetuity. We as New Mexicans could actually benefit from our resources instead of it being exported to Wall Street, or what was going to happen in the Avangrid takeover. And so during the whole merger, I learned a whole bunch about what Avangrid, had its sights on. And so, and that is, not only meeting our needs, what we could do is we could meet our needs with 100% renewables. The money could be repurposed for New Mexicans, but that then the state could make money on on exporting our renewable energy resources. And what we're learning, we've already engaged 4 utility experts to do a initial study for us. We're actually a little bit behind the curve. We should have been here 10 years ago, of course. But there's this really great, I encourage anybody to go to something called Rethink X, and then just look at a great video. It's only 20 minutes long, but it's actually inspiring. I mean, it's
Gonna
technical.
go on our next blog.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
So it's very exciting because it really talks about the electrification of our society and reduction to address climate, but also reduce pollution. So this is both a climate and an environmental, but it's also, you know, this is our health too, because there's lots of negative consequences from the current ways we use and consume energy, and then all the different possibilities that we could have. And so if you combine the technology with a political pathway to 100% renewable energy, I think that we could improve our economy, and that's what this study would look at. We're at a crossroads. We're a little late to the game, but what kind of benefit could we realize for both municipalities and tribal entities, and then the state?
Okay. And so what must happen to achieve public power in New Mexico?
Well, we want to have this study, and the study we're doing it first, an initial study to lay out, like, to whet the appetite of legislators and the public, to talk about like what's possible, and then a further in-depth study to you raise the word, and I think it's a perfect word. What's the design? How do we get there? And what are the specific things, and including the governance, because I know that people will have some questions about this structure, and we've seen really bad New Mexico governance, and we've seen great New Mexico governance, and so we want this to be one of competence and professionalism and hardworking, and, you know, because we are running out of time, as everybody knows.
So, and we're running out of time for this show too, so I want to make sure we get to this. Four Corners. Today, the hearing examiner presented his decision, recommended decision. I'm assuming you watched that. How did that go, and what's next? And what's at stake?
I think what's at stake is $300 million and the closure of one of the largest polluting plants left in the West. And it's the Four Corners coal plant. And I think that we need all to very quickly sign up for public comment and ask that the hearing examiner's recommended decision be rejected. And because the solution that he has, I think, is legally untenable. And I think that we need to protect ratepayers. And the way to do that is to deny PNM's current investments in Four Corners, and deny, quote unquote, abandonment, because it's not really closure. And if those
Just means that PNM's abandoning it.
It means it's abandoning it for what's called rate base, which is meaning us, ratepayers, but it's offloading that onto Navajo Transitional Energy Company. It's called NTEC, and people need to contact the commissioners, and we know that matters when you contact them and say you can't approve a $300 million financing order and then hope to claw back those costs, any part of those costs that were deemed to be found imprudent at some later date. That is unworkable legal remedy. Anyway, if you want to go on New Energy Economy site. I'm sure that Retake Our Democracy has a blog coming up about Four Corners as well, and to
Yes,
discuss what really the issues are. And I think that there's lots of other groups. I think all the interveners in this case, which is unusual, were opposed to PNM's abandonment application and request for $300 million. So all of the what's called exceptions or objections that came in were against the hearing examiner's recommended decision. And so that's important that we weigh in and we tell the commission that we don't want to pay for PNM's reinvestment in Four Corners. It's bad business decision, which, by the way, was made without any contemporaneous financial analysis. Zero.
right. Okay, so we got about 2 minutes. Can you tell us a little bit? I know you're known for your work at the PRC, but New Energy Economy also does a lot of great community work in terms of developing and fundraising for community solar projects. And so you've got something going with Milagro Sol. Can you tell us about that?
Well, we just solarized Casa Milagro, which is a home for formerly homeless people with mental health challenges. And that bill is $54,000. So to the extent that people want to contribute to the solarization of Casa Milagro, you're welcome to go on our site at newenergyeconomy.org and donate specifically to that. And then also we're going to have a year-end celebration to celebrate the victory on the merger and to discuss public power together, to discuss like, what are your questions? What are you excited about? What are you nervous about public power? And to have a fun time with wine and fabulous hors d'oeuvres and be in community, celebrate the merger. And one person, I'll just tell you this, because we've gotten a lot of heartfelt thanks around the merger, but my favorite one was, you have reinvigorated my faith in activism. And that probably matters most. I mean, we needed to win the merger in order to do that. But so what we're saying is that the merger, the denial of the merger was one thing, and it's now what is next is the question. And we want to get people involved because if you dare to struggle, you can win.
Yeah, and just to add to that, we got quite a few comments on our last blog because we sent out a blog right when the decision was made. And so many people said, thank you to New Energy Economy and Retake. And the same exact sentiment. It says, for the first time, I feel like my voice mattered. And like in specific, it was one person who said, I think that maybe my letter to Joe Maestas made a difference. And, commissioners made comments throughout the hearing that those comments did make a difference. So we're out of time. I want to thank Mariel for she's a busy person, believe me. And I want to thank her for taking time for doing this and for her work on this merger case. And we will see you next Thursday at your benefit. That's for sure. All right.
Yeah.
I hope a lot more of our listeners will be there too.
Thank you. If people want to go to newenergyeconomy.org, you can sign up for the fundraiser. It's December 16th, Thursday at 5:30. Thank you so much for having me, Paul.
Okay. Take care of yourself. Bye-bye. Yeah, I just want to close the show by saying we'll be back next week. Thank you very much, listeners. It's been a great week. Bye-bye.